The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Sweetwater Creek, causing Felicity James to drop her basket of freshly picked vegetables. She didn't scream, not anymore. After 3 years in this frontier town, she'd grown accustomed to the occasional violence that erupted like summer thunderstorms, sudden, fierce, and leaving destruction in their wake. It was 1878, and the railroad had brought prosperity and trouble in equal measure to this corner of Wyoming territory. Felicity brushed back a strand of auburn hair that had escaped her practical bun and knelt to retrieve her scattered produce, her calico dress gathering dust at the hem. "Let me help you with that, Miss James," came a deep voice, and she looked up to see Ryan Evans, his tall frame casting a shadow over her. His weathered Stetson was pushed back on his head, revealing eyes the color of a summer sky. "Mr. Evans," she acknowledged, accepting his help but careful to maintain a proper distance. The whole town knew Ryan Evans was passing through, a cattle driver who never stayed in one place longer than the changing seasons. "Trouble at the saloon again," he explained, nodding toward the direction of the gunshot as he gathered carrots and placed them gently in her basket. His hands were rough from work, but they moved with surprising gentleness. "There's always trouble somewhere," Felicity replied, her voice carrying a hint of the Eastern accent she couldn't quite shed, despite her years out west. Ryan studied her face, noticing the dusting of freckles across her nose and the determined set of her jaw. At 25, Felicity James wasn't like other women in Sweetwater Creek. She'd come west after losing her family in a fire, using her inheritance to open the town's only proper flower shop, a venture many locals had scoffed at initially. "How's your business faring?" Ryan asked, handing her the last potato. "Well enough," she answered, rising to her feet. "People thought flowers were a foolish luxury out here, but even tough men want something beautiful to give their wives sometimes. And the cemetery keeps me busy enough," she added with the dark humor that frontier life instilled. Ryan smiled, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "I've seen your wildflower arrangements in the window. Never seen Indian paintbrush displayed so fine." Felicity felt warmth creeping into her cheeks. "Few men notice such things." "That's kind of you to say, Mr. Evans. Will you be staying in Sweetwater long this time?" "Heading out tomorrow. Got cattle to drive up to Montana." He adjusted his gun belt, a habitual motion she'd noticed before. Something like disappointment flickered across her face. There, and gone so quickly Ryan thought he might have imagined it. "Well then, safe travels to you." As Felicity continued toward her small house at the edge of town, she didn't look back. She didn't see Ryan watching her go, his expression thoughtful beneath the brim of his hat. That evening, Felicity worked in the small greenhouse attached to her modest home, carefully tending to her most precious flowers. Most of her stock came from wild specimens she collected and cultivated, but she also ordered seeds from back east, treasures that arrived on the monthly stagecoach. A knock at her door startled her. Visitors were rare at this hour. Wiping her hands on her apron, she made her way to the front of the house. Ryan Evans stood on her porch, hat in hand, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Mr. Evans? Is something wrong?" "No, madam. He cleared his throat. "I wanted to ask you something before I left." Felicity stepped aside to let him enter, propriety be damned. A woman alone receiving a man in the evening might raise eyebrows, but at 25, she was already considered a spinster by most. Her home was simple but refined, with touches of her former life in Pennsylvania, a fine clock on the mantel, botanical drawings framed on the walls, and shelves lined with books. Ryan looked out of place among her delicate belongings, his broad shoulders and rugged appearance a stark contrast to the femininity of her space. "What did you wish to ask me?" Felicity inquired, remaining standing as protocol demanded. Ryan turned his hat in his hands, a nervous gesture she hadn't seen from him before. "I've passed through Sweetwater Creek half a dozen times in 3 years, Miss James. Each time, I find myself looking forward to seeing your shop, your flowers." Felicity's pulse quickened. "My flowers, and their keeper," he added, a hint of that dimple appearing. "I thought perhaps you might tell me your favorite flower, that is, so I could remember it." The request was so unexpected that Felicity laughed softly. "My favorite flower is not one I can grow here. It's called the Rocky Mountain columbine, blue and white, like the sky meeting snow. My father once brought one home from a trip when I was a girl. Ryan nodded, committing this information to memory. Thank you, Miss James. May I ask why you wanted to know? He placed his hat back on his head. Just a curiosity. I'll be riding out at dawn. Felicity walked him to the door, puzzled by the brief visit. Safe travels, Mr. Evans. Until next time, he replied, and disappeared into the darkness. True to his word, Ryan Evans and the cattle drive were gone the next morning, leaving Sweetwater Creek quieter in their absence. Felicity tried not to feel the disappointment too keenly. Men like Ryan Evans were like tumbleweeds, never staying rooted anywhere for long. 2 weeks passed, filled with the ordinary rhythm of frontier life. Felicity arranged flowers for a wedding, crafted wreaths for a funeral, and tended her greenhouse with devoted care. She joined the ladies' sewing circle on Wednesdays, though she never quite fit in with the local women who found her Eastern education and independent business unusual. You need a husband, Felicity, Mrs. Peterson declared one afternoon, not for the first time. A woman alone is a woman vulnerable. I'm managing quite well on my own, Felicity replied evenly, her needle moving in precise stitches through the quilt they were making for the church raffle. That cowboy seemed sweet on you, observed young Mrs. Thornton, who at 19 was already married with a baby. The tall one with the cattle drive Evans, wasn't it? Felicity kept her eyes on her work. Mr. Evans is just passing through, like all the others. Men stop passing through when the right woman gives them reason to stay, Mrs. Peterson stated with authority. My Herbert was a wanderer too, before he met me. Felicity changed the subject, unwilling to indulge in futile daydreams about a man who lived his life on horseback, chasing horizons. That night, a fierce thunderstorm rolled across the plains. Felicity hurried to secure her greenhouse, worrying about her more delicate specimens. As lightning split the sky, illuminating her yard in harsh white light, she caught sight of a rider approaching. Fear clutched at her throat. Nighttime visitors during storms meant trouble. She reached for the rifle she kept by the door, a necessity for a woman living alone on the frontier. The rider dismounted, struggling against the wind and rain. Felicity raised the rifle, calling out over the storm, "State your business or ride on." "Miss James, it's Ryan Evans," came the shouted reply. Felicity lowered her weapon in disbelief. She unlocked the door, and Ryan stumbled inside, water streaming from his slicker and hat. "Mr. Evans, what in heaven's name?" He shook off his rain gear, revealing clothes that had seen hard travel. His face was tanned darker than before, with several days' growth of beard shadowing his jaw. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, bright with some unnamed emotion. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, breathless as though he'd been running instead of riding. "I couldn't wait until morning." "Wait for what? I thought you were in Montana." Ryan reached into his saddlebag and carefully withdrew a small wooden box with air holes punched in the lid. He placed it on her table with the reverence of a man handling precious cargo. "Open it," he urged softly. Mystified, Felicity approached the box. She lifted the lid cautiously, then gasped. Inside, nestled in damp moss, was a cluster of blue and white Rocky Mountain columbines, their delicate petals remarkably intact despite what must have been a long journey. "How did you?" "I remembered what you said. About your favorite flower." Ryan's voice was rough with fatigue. "When we reached Montana, I heard tell of these growing in Colorado. So after the drive was done, I rode south." Felicity's fingers hovered over the blossoms, afraid to touch them lest they prove a dream. "You went all the way to Colorado? For flowers?" "For your flowers," he corrected. "I know a man's not supposed to ride hundreds of miles just to bring a lady a posy, but I reckon I've never been good at following the usual ways." Felicity looked up at him, seeing beyond the trail-worn exterior to something she'd glimpsed before but never fully recognized: a gentleness, a depth of feeling at odds with his wandering lifestyle. "No one has ever." She couldn't finish the sentence, emotion tightening her throat. Ryan stepped closer, his expression earnest. "Miss James, Felicity, I've crossed 3 states thinking about what I wanted to say to you. About how seeing your face has become the best part of driving cattle through Wyoming. About how I've never met a woman with the courage to build something beautiful in a place that values only the practical." Outside, the storm raged on, but in Felicity's small house, a different kind of tempest was brewing, one made of long-buried hopes and unexpected possibilities. I don't have much to offer, Ryan continued. No land, no house. Just my horse, my reputation as a reliable hand, and a heart that seems to have lost its inclination to wander. Felicity's hands trembled as she carefully lifted one of the columbines from the box. These won't last, she whispered. Even the most beautiful things fade. Some things take root, though, Ryan countered, reaching out to catch a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. If given the chance. In that moment, with rain lashing against the windows and the scent of mountain wildflowers filling her home, Felicity made a decision that would alter the course of her carefully ordered life. She placed her hand in his. Tell me about Colorado, she said. Tell me about all the places you've seen. As the night deepened, Ryan described landscapes Felicity had only read about in books: towering mountains crowned with snow even in summer, valleys filled with wildflowers stretching as far as the eye could see, forests of aspen trees whose leaves trembled like gold coins in the slightest breeze. I had to ask 3 different mountain men before I found someone who knew where the columbines grew, he explained. An old trapper finally led me to a high meadow. Said they were particular about their growing conditions, needed just the right balance of sun and shade, the right kind of soil. Like people, Felicity observed softly. Exactly like people, Ryan agreed, his eyes never leaving her face. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. Ryan, who had dozed in her armchair while Felicity slept in her bedroom, prepared to leave. I need to find work, he explained. I can't court you properly without means. The word court hung between them, filled with promise. Felicity, still in her robe with her hair loose around her shoulders, looked younger and more vulnerable than the composed businesswoman the town knew. Will you come back? She asked, the question carrying the weight of too many disappointments, too many people who had left her life. Ryan took her hand and pressed it to his lips, a gesture both old-fashioned and startlingly intimate. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. I found something worth returning for. As summer ripened toward fall, Ryan Evans became a familiar sight in Sweetwater Creek. He'd secured work at the Henderson Ranch 10 miles outside town, breaking horses and helping with the seasonal cattle roundup. Every Sunday, he would ride in for church, sitting beside Felicity in the small wooden chapel, causing the town gossips to buzz with speculation. He brought her flowers from Colorado, they say, whispered Mrs. Peterson to her neighbor during the sermon. Rode all that way just for flowers. The story of Ryan's journey had spread through town like wildfire, transforming him from just another drifting cowboy to a romantic figure in local lore. Some embellished the tale, claiming he'd fought off bears or hostile Indians to retrieve the precious blooms. Ryan neither confirmed nor denied these exaggerations, simply smiling when asked. For Felicity, the reality was romantic enough. She'd pressed one of the columbines between the pages of her Bible, a treasure more valuable than gold. The rest she had carefully planted in a special corner of her greenhouse, hoping against hope they might take root in Wyoming soil. One crisp October afternoon, Ryan arrived at her shop unexpectedly. Felicity was helping Mrs. Thornton select flowers for her baby's christening and looked up in surprise when the bell above the door announced his entrance. Mr. Evans, I thought you were helping with the cattle drive to Cheyenne this week. Ryan nodded politely to Mrs. Thornton, who giggled and made a hasty exit, promising to return later. When they were alone, he approached the counter, removing his hat. I rode back early. There was tension in his shoulders, an unusual guardedness in his expression. Is something wrong? Felicity asked, her mind racing through possibilities. Was he leaving? Had he received bad news? No, nothing's wrong, he assured her quickly. But I've made a decision, and I needed to speak with you about it. Felicity wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly nervous. Of course. Henderson's offered me a permanent position. Foreman, starting next spring when Wilkins retires. Relief washed over her. Ryan, that's wonderful news. It means staying in one place, he continued, watching her carefully. Putting down roots. Felicity's heart began to beat faster. And is that what you want? After all your years of wandering? Ryan reached across the counter to take her hand. What I want is a future with you, Felicity James. I've seen enough of this country to know that all its beauty can't compare to the sight of you tending your flowers. He withdrew a small leather pouch from his pocket and emptied its contents into his palm, a simple gold band adorned with a small sapphire. "It's not fancy," he said apologetically, "but the color reminded me of those columbines." Felicity stared at the ring, unable to speak. "I know it's only been a few months," Ryan continued, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "If you need more time, no," Felicity interrupted, then seeing his face fall, quickly added, "I mean, no, I don't need more time. Yes, I'll marry you, Ryan Evans." The transformation of his expression from disappointment to joy was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then leaned across the counter to kiss her, their first kiss, sweet and tentative and filled with promise. The wedding took place in December, with the church decorated with evergreen boughs and the winter berries Felicity had carefully preserved. Snow fell softly outside as they exchanged their vows, turning Sweetwater Creek into a wonderland of white. "I never thought I'd marry a flower lady," Ryan whispered as they shared their first dance at the celebration afterward. "Always figured I'd end up with some rancher's sturdy daughter who could rope a steer." Felicity laughed, her cheeks flushed with happiness. "And I never thought I'd marry a cowboy. Life has a way of surprising us." They made their home in a small cabin on Henderson's ranch, close enough to town for Felicity to maintain her shop. She hired young Lily Anderson, the blacksmith's daughter, to help her 3 days a week, allowing Felicity to split her time between her business and her new life as a rancher's wife. Their first year of marriage brought challenges along with joy. The harsh Wyoming winter tested their resilience, and spring brought flooding that damaged part of their cabin. Ryan worked long hours, sometimes not returning until after Felicity was asleep. She worried that he might regret giving up his freedom for domesticity. One evening, as they sat on their small porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and purple, Felicity finally voiced her fears. "Do you ever miss it? The open road, the different horizons?" Ryan considered her question thoughtfully, his arm around her shoulders. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. A man, his horse, a job to do." He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the dying light. "But then I remember waking up in some nameless camp, watching other men take out lockets with pictures of their wives and children, hearing them talk about going home. I had nowhere to go home to, Felicity. Now I do." She leaned her head against his shoulder, comforted by his words, but sensing there was more he wasn't saying. "And yet," she prompted gently. Ryan sighed. "Henderson's a good boss, but the work isn't always fulfilling. Breaking horses is what I know, but sometimes I think about having our own place, something we build together." The admission hung between them, a dream neither had dared voice until now. "We could," Felicity said, sitting up straighter. "The shop does well, and I've been saving. There's land for sale east of town, nothing grand, but enough to start." Ryan looked at her with a mixture of surprise and hope. "You'd want that? A ranch of our own?" "I want a life with you," she replied simply. "Whether that's in town or on a ranch or back in those mountains where the columbines grow." That night, they began to plan their future in earnest, not just as husband and wife getting through each day, but as partners with a shared vision. By the following spring, they had purchased 160 acres of land under the Homestead Act, with an option to buy more from a neighboring rancher who was returning east. Building their ranch was backbreaking work. Ryan continued his job with Henderson while clearing land and constructing their house on evenings and weekends. Felicity maintained her flower shop, adding medicinal herbs to her greenhouse to serve the community's needs and increase their income. News from back east brought an unexpected opportunity when Felicity's distant cousin passed away, leaving her a small inheritance. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to buy a small herd of cattle and hire 2 hands to help Ryan. "Evans Ranch," Ryan said with pride the day they moved the first cattle onto their land. "Has a fine sound to it, doesn't it?" Felicity, who had been examining a patch of wild sunflowers growing near their new cabin, looked up with a smile. "It certainly does, Mr. Evans." As if to bless their new beginning, that summer Felicity made an extraordinary discovery in her greenhouse. The Rocky Mountain columbine, the very one Ryan had brought her from Colorado 2 years earlier, had not only survived but thrived. A dozen delicate blue and white blossoms nodded on slender stems. "Ryan," she called, running from the greenhouse to the corral where he was working with a young horse. "Come quickly." Alarmed, he secured the horse and hurried to meet her, relaxing when he saw her excited expression. "What is it?" "They're blooming. The columbines, they're actually blooming." She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the greenhouse. Inside, Ryan stared at the flowers in amazement. "I'll be damned," he whispered, then quickly added, "Pardon my language." Felicity laughed, too delighted to care about propriety. They weren't supposed to grow here. Everyone said the soil wasn't right, the climate too harsh. Ryan plucked one perfect blossom and tucked it behind her ear. Stubborn things, choosing to bloom where they're planted, against all odds. His eyes held hers. "Reminds me of someone else I know." That night, Felicity made an announcement of her own. "I've been waiting to be sure," she said, taking Ryan's hand as they sat by the fire after supper. "But I think it's time to tell you that our family will be growing come winter." For a moment, Ryan stared at her uncomprehendingly. Then understanding dawned, and with it, an expression of such naked joy that Felicity felt tears spring to her eyes. "A baby? We're having a baby." His voice was hushed, reverent. Felicity nodded, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "Our own little columbine, taking root in unlikely soil." Ryan gathered her into his arms, his shoulders shaking with emotion. When he finally pulled back to look at her, his cheeks were wet with tears. "When I rode out of Colorado with those flowers, I thought I was bringing you a gift," he said hoarsely. "I never imagined I was really finding my way home." Their daughter, Catherine Columbine Evans, was born during the first snowfall of December, with hair as dark as her father's and eyes that would eventually turn the same clear blue as the flower she was named for. Word spread through the county about the unusual middle name, and with it, the story of Ryan's journey across 3 states to bring back Felicity's favorite flower. New versions emerged now. Ryan had faced not just bears and hostile tribes, but blizzards, outlaws, and raging rivers to retrieve the precious blooms. Our story grows more adventurous with each telling, Felicity remarked one evening, nursing Catherine while Ryan read aloud from one of her botanical books. "Soon you'll have lassoed a grizzly and tamed a mountain lion." Ryan chuckled, setting the book aside. "Let them talk. The truth is miraculous enough for me." Over the years, their family and their ranch flourished side by side. Catherine was joined by a brother, Thomas, and later by twin girls, Rose and Lily, named for Felicity's beloved flowers. The Evans Ranch became known for quality horses and cattle, as well as for the small but thriving field of Rocky Mountain columbines that Felicity had coaxed into growing in Wyoming soil. Visitors to the ranch were often treated to the story of those first flowers and the cowboy who had crossed 3 states to bring them back, not knowing he was really bringing home his own heart. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ryan surprised Felicity with a journey back to Colorado, to the very meadow where he had found the columbines. Their children, now old enough to help run the ranch, insisted they take the trip alone. Standing in the high mountain meadow, surrounded by thousands of blue and white blossoms dancing in the breeze, Felicity felt the years fall away. She was again the young woman in the flower shop, and Ryan the cowboy who had noticed what no one else had, her longing for beauty in a harsh land. "Was it worth it?" she asked, turning to face her husband. His hair was silvered now at the temples, and lines of laughter framed his eyes. But he was still her Ryan, her cowboy who had come home. Giving up the open road? Settling down with a flower lady from back east? Ryan gathered her in his arms, as naturally as breathing. "Felicity Evans, when I rode across those states looking for a flower, I found the rest of my life instead. There's not a day goes by that I don't thank God for the courage to turn back toward Sweetwater Creek instead of continuing on my way." Above them, the Colorado sky stretched endless and blue, while at their feet, the columbines nodded in the mountain breeze, delicate yet resilient, like the love that had taken root in unlikely soil and bloomed beyond all expectation. "We should take some seeds back," Felicity suggested, bending to examine a particularly fine specimen. "For the grandchildren Thomas and his wife are giving us come fall." Ryan smiled, remembering another time, another handful of flowers carefully packed for a journey. "Some legacies are worth carrying forward," he agreed, "even if it means crossing a few states to do it." Hand in hand, they walked through the meadow, gathering seeds from the flowers that had brought them together, preparing to carry them home to the life they had built from love, determination, and the courage to let beauty take root in unexpected places.